Hello, hello, Regis Kilbin is the name, and Heroes of the Storm is the game. And today I'm going to be taking a look at the brand new hero, Artanis. He was released today, and it's time for my first impressions. So we're going to take a look at the basic abilities, heroics, and all the different talents that Artanis has to offer, and maybe we'll be able to figure out a starter build even. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take Artanis into try mode. Now, to understand Artanis and give him some context, he's been presented as a sort of bruiser type character. He is a warrior by classification, but most people believe he is going to be more about dealing damage and kind of supplemental crowd control, not as the primary meat shield for your team. So let's consider him as a bruiser as we take a look at these abilities, but also maybe we'll see if he can tank as well based on his different talents. So we're set to level 20. I want to give us that baseline to compare stats and numbers and so on and so forth. So first observations I have, Artanis' health pool is at 4920, which is not as high as some warriors, but it is higher than others such as Anubarak. Now I don't have the stats up, but that puts him kind of low to mid-tier, as far as health pools are concerned. So that's not too bad of a start for a pseudo tank. I mean, Anubarak can tank, Arthas can tank. Those bruisers in a pinch can do tanking work, and it feels like Artanis has that potential as well. So up first, let's look at Artanis' trait. It's called Shield Overload. It has a 20-second cooldown. If you take damage while below 50% health, you gain a 984-point shield for 5 seconds. And your basic attacks lower the cooldown of Shield Overload by 4 seconds. Okay, so that's pretty interesting, right? And what that means is that anytime Artanis gets below 50%, we can simulate this here, his trait will kick in and it'll give him almost a 1,000-point shield, which you can see is about a 20% shield. So that's actually kind of huge. 1,000 damage is a lot. It's nothing to scoff at level 20, and you can see it's quite a few bars there. And if you're attacking, you'll see that cooldown gets chunked off. It becomes much shorter. So given his attack speed, the cooldown on that is really nowhere close to 20 seconds. It seems like it's going to be more like maybe 4 or 5 seconds, particularly with his W, which we'll talk about shortly. That shield's going to be going off constantly as long as he's below 50% health. So that really encourages Artanis to hard engage and stick around in fights and cause chaos without ever getting healed up. So Artanis really has to play aggressively and confidently with a low health pool, which is going to be a really true sign of his skill. But also the healer on your team is going to need to recognize when to keep Artanis full of health and potentially when to just let those shields chain and send your healing priorities to other heroes. So Artanis is going to definitely call out skilled players, both himself and the supports who are with him. Now I did notice something interesting. It says if you take damage while below 50% health, you gain a shield. So that does mean that the shield won't just be auto-regenerating. Much like Rainer's heal will just go off anytime the cooldown is up as long as he's below a certain threshold. This won't do that. You're going to have to actually take an instance of damage to turn the shield on. Now that means if you're fighting against Artanis and you have a pretty high burst ability, let's say Nova is dropping bombs on Artanis when he's at 10% health. That's not going to trigger the shield because it'll just kill him instantly, it seems. So getting Artanis to a low point and then cutting damage and then finishing him off with one big bursty spell seems like the best way to kill him. Otherwise that shield's just going to be going on and on and on. So you do have to be careful with Artanis entering a fight if you're low, because if that first hit kills you, then you're done for and you'll never give your shield time to actually proc. So, going on to the basic abilities, let's take a look at these. Q is called Blade Dash. 65 mana, is not cheap, but not anything crazy. It has a 10-second cooldown. You dash forward and deal 125 damage to enemies, then return and deal 375 damage. So, 125 damage is not much at level 20, but 375 is actually nothing to scoff at. That's not too bad. And if you do happen to hit them with both sides of it, that's going to be 500 damage. So you can see the Q in action there. The range is moderate, I'd say. It's not super long range, but not too short. You can dash through walls and hit someone over here, so that'll be great for securing kills on the other side of the walls. It doesn't look like it's cancelable, so you do have to follow through the whole route, so you cannot use this as an escape because you'll end up going farther back than you started, essentially, because you'll have to stop walking. So it's not an escape utility, it's purely an engage / chase / damage effect. And it does damage in the full AoE, it looks like. Yeah, see, we hit the gate and the wall there. So that'll be good for minion waves and just if enemy teams are clumped together pretty well. And it looks like if you end up... Yeah, okay, so anything that's in the path on the start gets the 125 all the way through the path, and anything that's in any point of the path on the way back gets the 375. So if you're hitting heroes with this, they may be able to move out of the way in between travel time. But if it looks like if you hit them right at the end of it, they're going to take both hits because that end point is the turnaround. So whoever's right at the end simultaneously takes both portions of the damage. So if you line this up well, it looks like you're going to be able to guarantee essentially the full damage amount instead of giving people an opportunity to juke your attack. So W is Twin Blades, 25 mana, that's super cheap ability, and a 4-second cooldown means you can pretty much spam this thing all day. Your next basic attack immediately strikes the enemy 2 times. So let's see this in action. We are attacking, and then we W, and we get 2 instant attacks, essentially. Very, very quick succession. So we did about 750 damage there, almost instantly. So that's actually pretty nice burst. And it feels to me like it's going to be best if you use that immediately after an attack completes, as opposed to opening a fight. Let me open with this and see if the attack rotation is cleaner. No, actually it's worse. It takes you far longer. So yeah, don't open with this. In other words, don't preload your Twin Blades. It's going to be better to open with a basic auto attack and then move into Twin Blades while you're in the auto attack cooldown period. That's going to maximize your damage, it looks like, at least on my first impressions here. Okay, yeah, see, that's just objectively worse. You only do 500 damage in the first burst instead of a near instant 750. So Artanis' E is called Phase Prism, 70 mana. That makes it pretty pricey. 14-second cooldown is also quite long, so this is not a spammable ability. This is going to have to be used in key moments. This fires a Phase Prism that deals 145 damage to heroes and swaps your position with theirs. So let's see if we can't get an enemy hero in here. 145 damage here is very minimal. This is not a damage ability by any means. It's just kind of accessory. The real goal here is to do that, which is a pretty neat trick. I think that's going to be a pretty cool engaging tool. It supports Artanis' aggressive playstyle, but also helps you isolate people. And if you look where you start and cast the ability, it moves them to where you began. So you can kind of control it pretty well. If you're... I need to hit my abilities. If you're closer, it moves them closer. So it always goes to your previous position. It swaps your position with theirs, is the keyword there. So it's best if you hit that at its max range for engagements. The damage is minimal. It wasn't working on minions. It looks like it only works with heroes and only does damage to heroes. So it's pretty limited in its utility, but man, when it hits, that can be a pretty solid way to isolate enemies. Okay, so that's it for the basic abilities and the trait. Now let's go ahead and start analyzing the talents for Artanis. See if we can't figure out a talent build here. At level 1, we have Kydarian Resonance. If Phase Prism, that's our E, misses, reduce the cooldown by 8 seconds and refund 100% of the mana. Okay, so I'm never a huge fan of talents that reward ineptitude. If you're going to miss your phase prism, you just need to be punished. In other words, hit your phase prisms. I don't see the mana reduction being important, and 8 seconds reduction still leaves it as a 6 second cooldown, so it doesn't even help you get like 2 off in a row. You'll still have to wait till the right moment again. So I don't see any value with Kydarian Resonance at all. Reactive Parry, activating Twin Blades, reduces the damage received from the next hero basic attack by 50%, can store up to 2 charges. So this is a block that can be activated every 4 seconds and has 2 charges. So that's actually not too bad. If you're looking for a tanky build here, block is always pretty solid and underrated. And this is a timeable 4-second cooldown block, which is pretty good. So that's got a lot of potential. Let's keep Reactive Parry in mind. Amateur Opponent, Twin Blades, attacks deal 100% bonus damage versus non-heroic enemies. So this is only good against siege, minions, mercenaries, so on and so forth. And 100% bonus damage is going to double the attack, so it's going to be 488 at level 20. But the problem is, I mean, auto-attacking siege enemies is really not that useful, is it? If this was against heroic enemies, of course, that'd be great for shredding enemy heroes. It'd be overpowered, but I don't see the value in auto-attacking mercenaries or minions all that often. So I don't think a siege Artanis build is going to make a lot of sense. I think we're going to have to pass on Amateur Opponent. And then finally we have the standard Seasoned Marksman. For every 6 enemy minion or mercenary kills near your hero, you gain 1 basic attack damage, and hero takedowns count as 3 minion kills. If you're going to build an auto-attack Artanis, it's all about killing enemy heroes. This will probably be your way to go over block. But Reactive Parry seems like far and away the strongest talent at this tier to me, because it can help you stay alive even if you are offensive, and as a bruiser you do need some survivability. So we're going to go with Reactive Parry to start. Now for level 4 talents, up first is Shield Battery. This reduces shield overload's cooldown by 6 seconds if it lasts for the full duration. So that's your trait. It has a 20-second cooldown by default. If it lasts for the entire 5 seconds duration, it reduces your cooldown by 6 seconds. Now, to me, that doesn't seem to have a lot of natural synergy, because the whole point of your shield is, right, that you want to extend your life pool and take lots of damage and absorb hits. If your shield is lasting the full duration, that means it's not being burned through, which means you're probably not in a life-threatening situation, which means you probably don't need additional shield. That seems like this would only proc near the end of fights or after you've already gotten out of a scrape. So the 6-second cooldown reduction to me doesn't make a ton of sense. It seems like it would only help when you're already winning or disengaged. I might be missing something here, but I don't see a lot of utility in Shield Battery right now. So Lethal Alacrity increases Blade Dash's range and speed by 30%. So Blade Dash is our Q, and this is its range and speed beforehand. Feels pretty fast and rangy already. Let's see what it looks like. We end up right here. Keep that in mind from this position. It's right here. We just got that talent, so okay. I have to be honest, I didn't notice the speed increase at all.
Choose a talent.
I want to try this again. So we're starting on that pebble, and we're going to the edge of the brown. We're starting on this pebble, and we're going to the edge of the brown in the grass. Now we're going to increase this. Now, I felt like we moved farther back. We're going a little beyond the grass. It's really not that much, is it? It's like one character model distance extra. But it feels like we're moving farther back every time. Keep in mind I haven't moved the character, but look how much farther back we're getting. So, Lethal Alacrity is actually kind of does something unique in that it allows you to poke and return even farther for a little bit more safety and a softer poke risk. That's interesting. I didn't really detect a speed difference personally, and I don't know the advantage of a speed difference. I guess it makes it a little harder for enemies to dodge the attack area, which could be nice. And the increased range is not that notable. I mean, maybe just 1 or 1.5 hero model circles. So I don't know if it's going to be that useful, but it's not bad. I could see some use in this talent. Let's go ahead and look at the rest, see what we have.
Choose a talent.
We also have Chrono Surge. Hitting an enemy hero with Phase Prism grants a 25% bonus attack speed for 4 seconds. Now, Phase Prism is our E. Let's see if we can see this in action. Let's wait for our friend Artanis to show up here. So, to give you an idea of our standard attack speed, let's hit some minions. It's pretty slow. That did not feel particularly faster, did it? I mean, 25% is nothing to scoff at, don't get me wrong. 25% straight base damage increase is... I don't have the talent selected, so of course it didn't feel that way. Let's try again when I'm not being stupid. I mean, sure, it feels a little faster, but still, 25% for 4 seconds every 14 seconds does not feel like it's going to change the world to me. That's 10 seconds of downtime and 4 seconds of uptime. Now, admittedly, attack speed does help you shorten the cooldown on your trait, which is nice. More attacks means a quicker cooldown here on your shield. So, if you have other attack speed heroes that have you attacking super quickly and this thing's just going off constantly, you could be theoretically almost unkillable. So that could be nice, but it just doesn't hit that often, and it feels to me like when you're switching positions is at the beginning of fights, when you're setting up engagements, because it's going to put you pretty deep in enemy territory, so it's not like you're going to be using this as an escape very often. In other words, the synergy with your shield probably doesn't matter that much at the start of fights when Phase Prism is most useful. So I don't see a lot of value here yet.
Choose a talent.
And then finally, let's look at Templar Zeal. Blade Dash's cooldown recharges 75% faster while you are below 50% health. So it reduces the cooldown to 2.5 seconds if it's 75% reduction. That's pretty crazy. It could be a lot of fun when you're in the thick of it and your shield is proccing and you're going nuts on the enemy team, and you just get to blade dash constantly, because the damage here is not insignificant, and it makes you very hard to hit with abilities, and there's just a lot of cool stuff that blade dash can do. So I gotta turn cooldowns back on here to see this in action. So it's really not going off that often, is it? I mean, it's still pretty significant cooldown. So it's, once again, you have to pick the talent, Regis. It helps. Let's refresh these forts. So it should be about 2.5 to 3 seconds of cooldown. You get to use it. I mean, it just doesn't feel like the rhythm is that powerful. It just doesn't seem like it does that much to me. Maybe if you're hitting enemy heroes and really impacting it and avoiding them, it makes some sense. So far, I don't love any of the talents at the level 4 tier.
Choose a talent.
but my instincts tell me that I think lethal Alacrity has the most obvious advantages to me because it's fully controllable. It's just generally always going to be good. I don't see a downside to it. It allows you to do something different. I'm going to stick with lethal Alacrity for now, but I'll be interested to see these in action and understand which really provides the most advantages in teamfight scenarios. So, for level 7, we're going to go take a look at Warp Sickness. Phase Prism, that's our E, remember, also slows the enemy's movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds. Okay, so a 30% slow is not enormous, but it's certainly enough. That's typically what Jaina slows will give you. And 3 seconds is a pretty decent duration as well. So compare that to like a Jaina chilled slow. And that's after using your E, which I think the E is going to be best used to hard engage or catch an enemy out of position. So there is a lot of synergy with slowing them down at the same time. If you catch a squishy out with your E and their Vala is caught in between you and the enemy and your own team, 30% slow is going to make it even easier to finish her off. It might be a little bit of overkill, if anything, because good E's will probably result in deaths a lot of the time anyway, so this might be a waste of talent depending on what else is available in this tier. But I do like it at a base level. It's got some pretty cool synergy. So let's take a look at what else we got. Solarite Reaper increases the damage of the first dash of Blade Dash by 150%. So that takes the first chunk, 125, and adds 125 to it for 250, and adds another 62, should be about 312 damage on the first hit, and we can test that here. Let's see how much. 313. So we round it up, yeah. So that's not too bad. That makes the total increase what, almost 200 points of damage, and makes the total ability do almost 700 damage. So 700 damage ability is pretty strong if you do catch somebody at the end of this thing. That's nothing to scoff at all. I can see some pretty cool utility here in a damage-based Artanis build, and maybe just in a general bruiser build as well.
Choose a talent.
So let's look at Psionic Synergy. Every time Blade Dash hits an enemy hero, it reduces shield overload's cooldown by 4 seconds. Okay, now that sounds pretty neat. Unlike the shield reduction cooldown here with shield battery, which didn't make a lot of sense to me, this one sounds like it could do some work. So anytime your Q hits a hero, your overload cooldown is reduced by 4. So that 20-second cooldown is never, ever going to be 20 seconds, because you're going to be auto-attacking to reduce it. You can see it's already... Oh, I got cooldowns off. It's just never going to be long. And this allows you to chunk 4 seconds off as well every time it hits. And it sounds to me from the language that if you hit 3 people, it will take 12 seconds off. So this really supports the diving, hard engage Artanis style where you get right in the middle of it and just keep refreshing that shield constantly every 2 or 3 seconds. And this one even allows you to almost trigger the shield if you know that there's 4 or 5 seconds left and you desperately need to get a shield off. You can save your Scionic Synergy proc with Blade Dash until you absolutely need it to avoid some burst or maybe get out of the area of effect damage of a spell. So this makes sense to me for a controlled player who's conscious of their cooldowns and wants that shield up all the time. Psionic Synergy is pretty neat. And then finally we have the standard follow through. After using ability, your next basic attack deals 40% additional damage. That might make a lot of sense for a damage Artanis build, particularly because of the synergy with your Q. That's that next attack on your W hits for quite a bit extra. If you notice there, it hit for 342 instead of 244. So given how quick that ability's up, follow through will give you a lot of extra damage over time, over the length of a fight. It's going to make some big differences. But for the sake of a general bruiser build, I think we do want to go with Psionic Synergy. I like what it can offer us. But Solarite Reaper also makes a lot of sense to me as well. And Warp Sickness is pretty good too. But for fun, I'm going to stick with Psionic Synergy for now. We'll see. I like Blade Dash as an ability, so it looks like I'm going to be supporting it quite a bit. Now, for the fun stuff, level 10 Heroics. Up first is Suppression Pulse. Fire a large area pulse from the Spear of Adun, dealing 250 damage and blinding enemies for 4 seconds, and it has unlimited range. That's pretty important. Global range is nuts. It seems like Artanis doesn't have any mechanics to get into fights quickly like a number of other warriors might. He's got full spawn timers when he dies. There's no mechanics to shorten it like a Leoric or a Diablo. So having a global presence can be fun. Like if you die and you need to get right back in the action as soon as you're up, you can still impact the map with your R. And if you have good vision and good awareness of the map too, even if you're late to an objective or a fight, that R going anywhere is going to make a big difference. You can still impact your team positively. So global range, really, really big area of effect. I mean, if you look here, you can catch all 4 of those buildings in one hit. That's really nice for team fights. Or this is going to cover up a whole temple on Sky Temple, for instance, you know. And it's going to capture the entire fight battleground at once of this thing. So you're going to hit teams. It's going to be hard to miss with Suppression Pulse. Plus, it's got a little bit of a warning for the enemy team visually, but it's not that long. As long as they're not right on the fringe, they're going to have trouble getting out of that thing. Now, more importantly is the damage and the blind. The damage isn't much. 250 damage is pretty insignificant at level 20, but a 4-second blind is not. I kind of feel like Artanis could be a great counter to auto-attack teams. Just his kit in general. He's kind of hard to stick to. He has that shield that's going to be hard to push through. And this thing is going to be a great team fight mechanic against auto-attack teams that are counting on all that to auto-attack damage, like a Rainer or Butcher or a Thrall or whoever else. So it's going to be pretty cool to open fights with and then hard engage as you dive in and start going nuts. I like Suppression Pulse a lot as a heroic ability. I think it's going to be very strong. But let's take a look at Purifier Beam as well. Let's get there. Okay, let's also get Arthas back in the fight. So Purifier Beam. This targets an enemy hero with an orbital beam from the Spear of Adun, dealing 400 damage per second for 8 seconds. So that is a ton of damage. If it goes through the full cycle and hits somebody with every tick, that you're talking about 3,200 damage, which, you know, some heroes' entire health pools. The beam will chase the target as they move, and it also has an unlimited range, so you can also use it from anywhere on the map. It is targetable, it's not an area of effect. So let's target Arthas and watch this thing in action. So it doesn't actually hit in 400 damage ticks, it hits in 100 damage ticks every quarter of a second. And it does have a small area of effect, so you notice it's hitting the minions as well as Arthas. So teams that are clumped together, or like the Vikings for instance, might have some trouble with Purifier Beam. Now, it's hard to tell with this AI Arthas, but it looks like, yeah, you are going to be able to run out of it pretty easily, as long as you're aware. So, unless somebody's stunned or has a pretty severe slow on them, you can't expect to get the full value out of Purifier Beam. It has an 80-second cooldown as well. Now, remind me what the cooldown was on... Suppression Pulse had a 50-second cooldown, so that's pretty short. You're going to get to use that often, whereas with Purifier Beam, it's 80 seconds is not too bad, but it feels lower impact, and it's usable less often. So I don't see Purifier Beam being the pick much. I think Suppression Pulse is going to take the crown for Artanis Heroics. So let's move on to level 13. Up first we have Phase Bulwark. When Shield Overload activates, you take 50% less damage from abilities for 3 seconds. So that is a spell shield, but it's a spell shield that activates pretty often, given how often we feel like we can activate our trait with our cooldown reduction attacks. So that's going to be pretty strong, potentially. A spell shield that's going off, you know, every 3, 4, 5 seconds and lasting for 3 or 4, 5 seconds. You might have a permanent spell shield in some instances, or at least close to it. An 80% plus uptime spell shield could be huge against certain compositions. So if there's like a Jaina or a Kael'thas in the enemy team, Phase Bulwark could be just instrumental to victory, frankly. It might win you games on its own. So we'll keep that one in mind. We've also got Triple Strike, increases Twin Blade's number of basic attacks to 3. So that's our W. I'd like to see this in action. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, I had cooldowns off, but still. Wow. That was significant. I really like that. Now it was a little skewed because of the. Let's not pick the siege-based. The siege-based talent level 1. You can really burn through buildings if you do that combo. But let's see it in standard. Still, it's pretty much 1,000 damage hit every 4 seconds. That's a lot of damage. I like Triple Strike a lot. Even if you're building a bruiser or tank, Triple Strike has more synergy with your shield overload, cooldown reductions. This is a strong talent. This makes Artanis scary in one-on-one situations. I want to see this against Arthas. I don't know if I'm biased because of how cool it looks in the damage, but it sure feels strong. I guess it didn't really do that much to this Arthas, but still, we're chunking him pretty hard every time. And against a squishier character, it's going to be even more significant. I like Triple Strike a lot. I think that's going to be my early favorite. Gravitron Vortex. Phase Prism pulls and damages an additional enemy hero near the first. So that's our E. I don't see that being great very often. Usually, enemy heroes aren't going to be that clumped together, and sometimes you won't want to. Sometimes you'll just want to isolate the squishy character. You won't want to bring a healer or a tank along with them. I don't see Graviton Vortex working in your favor all that often, or changing the impact of the skill that much. I think that's a pass for me. Finally, standard Burning Rage, deal 50 damage per second to nearby enemies. You can never really go wrong with Burning Rage, but I feel like Phase Bulwark and Triple Strike are two really strong talents. It's going to be hard for Burning Rage to keep up with them. Phase Bulwark if you're looking for a more defensive edge, and Triple Strike for the bruiser / damage roll. Stick with Triple Strike for now. Level 16, Shield Surge. Increase shields, overloads shields by 50%, but decays to the normal amount over 3 seconds. So if we add roughly 490 points of shield to this, it's going to be close to, you know, a 1,450 point shield, which is about 30% of our health pool. So it makes it a 30% shield, but that only lasts for 3 seconds instead of 5 seconds. So it's actually pretty good. An extra 500 points of health for 3 seconds, because that 3 seconds is when it matters, right? The moment the shield is triggered is typically when you're taking quite a bit of damage because you've already dropped below 50%, or you're actively engaged in a fight. So I don't think the decay over 3 seconds is probably that significant. It doesn't say the rate of decay. If it's an even rate of decay, or if it just cuts off exactly at 3 seconds, makes a small difference. But it still feels like you'd get most of the value of this shield right away. So I think Shield Surge looks okay as a talent. I'd have to see it in action and play with it some more, but I feel okay about it. There's also Zealot Charge. When Twin Blades is active, you charge a short distance to your target. That is interesting. Curious about this. It's not actually that short of a target, I felt like. It shows you the range there of that blue circle. It's not the worst ability ever. Artanis already has quite a bit of pseudo-mobility and hard engagement mechanics. And this is another one that supports that. You could even use this as an escape of sorts if you get too deep and you need to retreat to the enemy front line before you back out to your own front line. You could use it this way, because the blue circle there looks like is the range of this. That's quite a bit. Also, it just has some StarCraft flavor to it. I don't think Zealot Charge is actually that bad. It makes me feel like I'm playing a Zealot in StarCraft, right? But and then you just do that instant damage burst. Huh. That's fun. That's a fun ability. Fun talent. Let's see what else we can do here at level 16. Let's take a look at Titan Killer. Twin Blades attacks against heroes deal an additional 2.5% of the target's maximum health and damage. So that's kind of a giant killer for Artanis, but only on his W attacks. So 2.5% of a target's maximum health. So, for instance, a 5,000 health hero, 1% would be 50 damage, and 2% would be 100 damage, would be about 125 extra damage per attack. Let's see if we can see that in action on Arthas. So our normal attacks have been doing 244. We're triggering some blocks here to make this math a little messy, but yeah, we go from 244 to 342 on Arthas in particular, so about 100 on him. So it's not nothing, but since it's only on the Twin Blades attacks, I don't feel like it's going to add up that quickly or that often. I think I'd rather have Zealot Charge or Shield Surge in this case.
Choose a talent.
And then finally, level 16, we have Psionic Wound. Twin Blades' final strike causes enemy heroes to become vulnerable for 2 seconds, increasing all damage taken by 25%. So this lines up with a lot of other heroes, level 16. Vulnerability talents at 25%. It's Twin Blades' final strike, so that means you can do it every 4 seconds. That's actually pretty strong. But it only makes them vulnerable for 2 seconds, so it has about 50% uptime as it stands. Still, that's pretty good for a vulnerability talent. The thing is, you're going to have to stay pretty engaged to keep that on over long term. But if you set up an engagement correctly and your team has burst ready, that could just give you the extra burst damage you need to finish off that isolated opponent. So Psionic Wound is pretty neat too. All these talents feel solid. To my mind, I actually think Zealot Charge is going to be good but underrated by the community, and Shield Surge will be picked by a lot of people, and Psionic Wound might be the go-to talent for most builds starting out. So let's go ahead and try Psionic Wound now as well. And then finally at level 20, let's go ahead and take a look at Target Purified, since I randomly picked Purifier Beam. If the target of Purifier Beam dies, it automatically recasts on the nearest enemy hero. So that's going to be impossible to show here in try mode, but just listening to that, it doesn't feel that good to me. I guess to some extent, if you're in a team fight and you're cleaning up and you're winning the team fight, you could get 5 Purifier Beams off, which would be fun, and it would add up. But it's only good when you're already winning, right? When you're already getting a kill and already succeeding. It's kind of a win more talent, and I don't know if I like that, since Purifier Beam is already kind of weak in my mind. But it does kind of give you a security blanket on Purifier Beam, because even if Purifier Beam misses, as long as the target of it dies, it doesn't say dies to the damage of Purifier Beam, as long as they die, presumably while it's active from any damage, then you get a free one. So even if your Purifier Beam whiffs, but your team is cleaning up, you're going to get extra value, which is nice. It's kind of a backup plan. Let's reset our talents and look at
Choose a talent.
Orbital Bombardment. Let's pick some random talents. Suppression Pulse gains an additional charge. There's a 10-second cooldown between uses. So you cast it, and then you gotta wait 10 seconds to consume the second charge. The blind lasts for 4 seconds, so there's 6 seconds of non-blindiness between these. But in any given 14-second period, you'll have 10 seconds of blind, which is kind of cool. Or excuse me, 8 seconds of blind in any 14-second period. Yeah, 8 seconds of blind in any 14-second period. So, you know, in a short skirmish, that can be a huge advantage to blind the whole enemy team for more than half the engagement. Could be pretty fun. It's not a bad talent at all. But there's also 2 more. Let's see what they are before we decide what we like. Force of Will increases shield overload's cooldown reduction from basic attacks to 6 seconds. Okay, so it's 4 seconds now to 6 seconds. I feel like your shield will just be up always. Not taking enough damage from these things. So, okay, our shield procced, and it's already up again. You can get that second shield almost instantly if you wait to use your W until after your shield is procced. It's ridiculous. For a second I thought toggle cooldowns was still marked. That's crazy. 3 attacks basically and your shield is already back up, and with a twin blade spec to 3 attacks per twin blade, it could almost be 2 shields instantly. That calls to question, I don't think the shields do stack. I'm sure the new shield replaces your old shield, so you have to make sure you're taking damage or you're just wasting those extra shield cooldowns. There might even be some strategies involved with holding a basic attack until you get full use of a shield to reduce the cooldown, to time it better, but that's going to be left for extremely skilled and conscious and focused players. Anyway, Force of Will has a lot of interesting implications. I think that's a really strong talent. And then finally, it looks like we're going to have a Nexus Blades. Basic attacks deal 20% more damage and slow the target for 1 second with an auto attack focused Artanis or damage Artanis. That's going to be a hard one to pass up. Nexus Blades is just a really solid overall talent. And it's passive, so it's good for everybody of all skill levels. That's a solid offensive talent. But in my mind, Force of Will is actually the go-to choice here, even though I think Orbital Bombardment is pretty good for when you do pick the Suppression Pulse. So for me, it's going to be Force of Will, because I really like the playstyle of diving the enemy team hard, getting low, and just going nuts with shields and movement abilities and auto attacks. It's going to need teams to support it, but it's going to make Artanis one of the best dive characters in the game. So Force of Will for me. Let's go ahead and reset our talents here, and I think this is going to be my first attempt at a bruiser-style Arthas build. I'm trying to remember what I want to choose here. Okay, so let me run through this real quickly. Reactive Parry is basically block. Lethal Alacrity gives your dash a little bit more speed and range. Psionic Synergy is another cooldown reduction for your shields anytime you hit a hero with Q. Suppression Pulse is the AoE blind for 4 seconds. Triple Strike allows your W to hit 3 times, which is another way to reduce your shield cooldown. Shield Surge makes those shields that you're reducing cooldowns on stronger. And then finally, Force of Will, excuse me, I'm having trouble saying the word will, reduces that cooldown even further. So I guess inadvertently here, I kind of built a shield-based Artanis. This might not be a bruiser at all. This might be the tank build for Artanis. But I think you have enough damage with Triple Strike and his abilities in general that it'll still be pretty scary if you get in the enemy team's face or locked on to a squishy mage in the back line. So I'm going to have to playtest this build, of course, and many others to find out what I really like for Artanis. But I think this is a good start, and based on my first impression of the talents, this is what sounded the best to me. It's going to be fun to try out a few different things, though. Shield-based Artanis like this one, an auto-attack-based Artanis with Nexus Blades, and all the Twin Blades cooldowns. And I also want to see what Purifier Beam can do in the right setting, so we'll have to try that one out as well. So now that we've seen the abilities and the talents, I think I'm ready to take Artanis out into some real games and see what he's like. I hope you're ready as well. He's an awfully fun hero, and I hope this did help you get an understanding for exactly what he can do and some insights into how strong his talents might be. Until I hear from you again and get a chance to take you through another new hero, I do hope you enjoy Artanis out there on the ladder. Hit me up with any questions you have, and thanks much for your time. Until next time, game on.